to the clouds. Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Batra daf Lamed Vav. We're in Cheskas Abatim, still discussing the question of chazaka. And again, in this context, we mean chazaka that a effectively a status of ownership of a field that would allow you to not have any additional evidence beyond the fact that you were present on the field for a particular number of years. We've learned already that you need to have a valid claim that's associated with it. You can't just say, well, it didn't look like anybody owned the field, and so I decided to walk in and take it. That's not enough. But now we're going to introduce a non-Jew to our discussion and what happens in that situation. So let's take a look. That's where we're going next. So again, bottom of Lamed Hey, I'm a bet. Rav Yehuda, a Rav. So Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Yisrael haba machmas ovid kochavim, harehu ka ovid kochavim. That if a Jew has acquires a piece of property through somebody who's not Jewish. We'll call the non-Jew Chris. That's my typical non-Jewish name. And again, Reuven was the original owner, and now Shimon owns it, but he bought it from Chris. Harehu ka'ovid kochavim. He's like the non-Jew. Ma ovid kochavim ein lo chazaka ela b'shtar. Just as the non-Jew cannot get a chazaka through the years of ownership and presence, he needs to be able to produce a written document that shows a transfer of ownership. Af Yisrael haba machmas over kochavim ein lo chazaka ela b'shtar. So similarly, Shimon, who's bought it from Chris, he also cannot acquire an ownership through presence. He can only acquire it through having a contract. And Rashbam helps us out. Let's take a look at the Rashbam. Yisrael, it's the last Rashbam on the daf. We're not going to do the entire one. It's about 10 lines up in the Rashbam. Yisrael haba machmas akum, harehu ka'akum. That is again, if you acquired it through a non-Jew, so then you're also going to be treated like that non-Jew. So what are we talking about? Sada shakol yodim shahaisa shel Yisrael. Everybody knew that it belonged to a Jew. V'achla akum shalosh shanim o yoter, and a non-Jew ate from it 3 years or more. V'toin shalakam Yisrael, and he claims that he bought it from the Jew. V'azul Yisrael v'kana mehahu akum, and now a third Jew, namely Shimon, bought it from our non-Jew Chris. V'achla gamahu akar ha'akum shnei chazaka, and even he ate for additional 3 years of chazaka, o yoter, or even more. Lo havi chazaka. He does not have a valid, without something more, that's it. He does not get a chazaka. He must hold on to the shtar. Ella asi mare de ara umafik le miyadei de Yisrael. So rather, we're going to take it out of this guy's land, and we're going to have a Yisrael lizel v'litba la'akum de zavim minei. The ihu hu the afsid anafshe the lo havale lemizabin ara the Yisrael me'akum ad delema le havli shtar the zavini the zavanta lam Yisrael, that until the Shimon says, that Shimon has to say to Chris, you need to give me the contract that you with which you took this land, the deed with which you took this land from Reuven, because that's the only basis that I'm going to purchase it from you. Without that, I am going to be subject to losing the land to Reuven, who makes a claim for me, and so as a result, I'm not going to take it. The din chazaka leis le'akum, because we don't have a chazaka for a non-Jew. The low kol man de asi machmate, and similarly anybody who gets it as a result of him. And why is it? Now we get to the key words of this Rashbam that explains the reasoning. Distam akum gazlanim heim, that an average non-Jew is considered a potential thief. The Yisrael yarei limchot, and a Jew would be afraid to object, because throughout our history, and unfortunately it seems true again today, that if a Jew raises his hand, he gets beaten down. V'hilkach lo tiknu bahem chazaka keda amrina lekamen. And so as a result, they don't get the benefit of this decree, of this rule of not having to hold on to a contract in order, if they've been there for a certain amount of time. So back in,
How would you get this? I mean, there are a lot of assumptions here. First of all, we have to assume or know in some manner that this non-Jew bought the land from a Jew X number of years ago, because he could have denied all of that. Right? I mean,
meaning
how do we know that maybe this Shimon actually bought it from a non-Jew, and the non-Jew owned it for 60 years, and
well,
it was
that
his family? We have to have that information
no,
available.
that's why, that is exactly excellent point, and that's exactly why the Rashbam says that we're talking about the first words of the Rashbam are Sadesha Kol Yodim Shahaisa Shel Yisrael. That we're talking about a field that everybody knows it was Ruvain's field. You're absolutely right. If Ruvain can't prove that it was his field to begin with, he has no shot. Right? That you're absolutely right. We're talking about a situation where Reuven can prove it was his field, and he says, I never sold it. And so now, without a purchase contract, Chris is going to lose. Similarly, just as Chris would lose, Shimon will lose, even though Shimon is now there for 3 years. Since Shimon bought it from Chris, he has no more rights than Chris had. Okay,
Yeah,
but that's an
okay.
excellent point. You're absolutely right. We are assuming, there is a very important assumption, and we are assuming that it is clear that Ruvain owned this property. You're absolutely right on that front.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and so now
And then
Amara,
how do we get? And
yep,
here we're saying, because where is this limchot? The Yisrael Yareh limchot, right?
yep.
Near the last words that we read. Then how is this Yisraelite? How is he going to force the non-Jew to show him the contract? He's going to be afraid to challenge him.
100%. That's why he didn't say anything. That's why he didn't protest. That's why he hasn't done anything. He's just been afraid. But now that it's back in a Jew's hand, as we've seen before, sometimes we can have a situation where I'll encourage you to acquire something. I can't lie about it, but I can say, yeah, I think you should buy this piece of property because I would prefer to litigate with you over the original person. So you're absolutely right that maybe the Ruvain would never be able to take it away from Chris, but now that it's in Shimon's hands, and now that he's found out that it's in Shimon's hands, even though we might argue that, well, why don't you just have him complain now? We're going to say no. He doesn't have to complain. The Shimon doesn't get any rights beyond those rights that Chris had, and so as a result, now that Ruvain sees that the Shimon's holding the property, and he has the ability to litigate with Shimon because he's not afraid of Shimon. So that's exactly right. That's why he'll take it, and he'll go back to him
Now,
and,
didn't we
and
say
try
that
and and take him to court.
Didn't we say in the Rashbam that even though, if I remember, that even though the Jew, the squatter, Shimon, was there for 3 years, we can say he has no chazaka.
That's exactly right.
So if Reuven wants the land and he says, I'm not going to deal with this non-Jew, I'm going to encourage Shimon to buy it, and says that even maybe I'll give you a few dollars to go buy it from him, I get it back. Why is he going to wait for 3 years while Shimon sits on the land and then makes a claim that I have a chazaka? Why?
Well,
He could go tomorrow after Shimon buys it.
100%. So obviously, if in fact the guy did exactly what you said, so then presumably Reuven would not wait at all. But the point is the key point here is that Shimon gets no rights that Chris did not have. That's the bottom line. That's what we're teaching here. And that's the specific lesson, that notwithstanding what you just said, notwithstanding the fact that Reuven may have helped him, and notwithstanding the fact that maybe Reuven should now come and get it sooner, and notwithstanding the fact that Shimon ended up owning and being on the property for 3 years, because Shimon's acquisition was through Chris, he doesn't get any extra rights. But now we're going to qualify that. So it's important to let's move a little bit further, and we'll see how we're going to qualify it. So Amar Rava, Rava says, V'i Amar Yisrael, if Shimon in our situation says, if the Jew says, as we turn to Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, L'didi Amar li Ovid Kochavim D'minach Zavna Mehemen. The non-Jew told me he bought it from you. He's believed. Now, at the moment, we're going to say, let's take a look in the Rashbam. We're going to question what we're going to say. So don't necessarily accept and decide in your mind that this is in fact the rule, because we're going to undermine it in about 2 seconds. But let's take a look and see what. So again, because the Shimon has said that Chris specifically told me he bought it from Ruvain, we're now saying he's believed. Mid'asik, take a look at again top Rashbam on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. The mid'asik adaite limitan hachi, that from the fact that it came into his mind to make this claim. So hakinami hava matzil limitan ella
Anna.
Anna. I'm sorry, Anna. Zavinta minach, that I bought it from you. That in fact that and so the point is we should have amigo. That since I could have said I bought it from you, the al chalte shnei chazaka, and I ate for the years of the chazaka, de mehemen, that I would have been believed. Hilkach mali l'shak, malo l'shaker. Why did I have any basis to lie? The kushta kamar, and so as a result, we should his statement should be believed. So now the
How is
Gemara.
it different from what we said before when he said he acquired it from a non-Jew?
Excellent question. So
Because now we're saying he said the non-Jew
100%.
told me I bought it from, but we
Yeah,
said
that's
before.
exactly where the Gemara is going. Mi ika mida de ilu ovid kochavim amar lo mehemen ve'ilu amar Yisrael shmei de ovid kochavim mehemen. Is there something where a non-Jew could not say it? He would say it and he wouldn't be believed, but a Jew would say it, and now even though he's saying it in the idol, in the non-Jew's name, and Mehemen, he's going to be believed? Of course not. Let's take a look at Rashbam. Rashbam again, mi'ika midi, the end of the third line of Rashbam. De'ilu amar akum lo mehemen. It's something that the akum would say that he's not believed. Hashtanami. Now also chazaka she'eni matainahi. This should be a chazaka with no claim, because what's the difference between the original facts, as Ken just said? The afilu im ta'anato emet, even if it's true. De amar le akum de Yisrael zavna. Even if it's true that the non-Jew told him that he bought it from a Jew, hello, ein b'dvarav shel akum klum. There's no basis to those words. Below shtar, without a contract. And so as a result, that cannot be. Ella amar Rava. So Rava clarifies. No. I amar Yisrael kamei didi zavna ovid kochav minach. No, what I meant is that I saw the non-Jew buy it in front of, he bought the land in front of me. V'zavna nihale, and then he sold it to me. Well, in that case, Mehemen, now he's believed. Migu de iboy amarle ana zavinta minach, that I bought it.
Saw the non-Jew buy it from you, from Ruvain, basically.
Correct, exactly.
But one witness, it's only one witness.
That's true. But now that even though it's one witness, but now this witness has a valid claim, because now I have a valid claim through the whole thing. Now, of course, if in fact, there might be defenses, meaning that it could be that if the Jew then said yes, but he had a gun to my head, or something along those lines, so then that might be a sufficient defense. But the bottom line is that because again, if we say that the item is true, is that sufficient for us? And now it is sufficient, because now we have a Jew. If the item is true, that we saw the non-Jew buy it from the Jew, so now we have that the non-Jew is the valid owner, and so now we can have the Jew buy it from the Shimon buy it from Chris, and so as a result, now Shimon.
Wait a second, you're saying that Shimon says he saw the non-Jew buy it from Reuben.
Correct.
He's not, but not only is he only one witness, he's no gamba devar because he wants to keep the land for himself.
100%. But remember that we're in a situation where if instead he were to claim that he bought it from Ruvain, and again, there were no witnesses to that, he's the only witness to it that we have, he would be believed. So too here, we're going to believe him. It's based on that Migo concept, that because we would believe him, even though there are no witnesses to him buying it from Reuven, even though there are no witness, nothing, to support him whatsoever, because he's been there for 3 years, we would give him a chazaka. Again, he has evidence that he's been there for 3 years. We're going to allow him to make that claim, and because he could have made that claim, and now there's no trusting of the non-Jew that's involved here. It's all based on the testimony of the Jew. So as a result, we can allow the Jew to get a chazaka based on that migu. So although the migu doesn't work when I say that I bought it from Chris, the migu does work if I say I saw Chris buy it from you. Okay, so if the migo doesn't work if Chris tells me, if all that I have is that Chris told me he bought it from you, but if I actually saw that he bought it from you, then my migo does work. Okay, so we're going to have this was taught by Rav Yehuda, and we're going to have 3 additional laws that from Rav Yehuda, and then some additional related laws as well. For Rav Yehuda, Hai man denuket magla vituva. So hard for me to tell the difference between chafs and vets.
The Tuvalna.
Tuvalia. Amar Izel igare lidikla depanya. So if somebody takes up the equipment to harvest, a scythe and a rope to harvest a palm tree, because I bought it from this particular guy, right? So I say I'm going to go down to his field and buy it from him. Mehemen, he's believed. And lo chatzav, because lo chatzav inish lemigzar dikla delabdile, because people don't have the obnoxiousness to go and cut down something that they don't own. So that's law number 1. And again, it's based on the concept of chazaka, in the sense that we're talking about movable property. That we'll say that when he has the stuff in his hand, that it belongs to him. But Amar of Yehuda, Hai man de achazik migura de arode ulavar. That if somebody tries to make a chazaka from the wall of a field and outside that wall, lo havi chazaka, then it's not going to be a chazaka. So again, what they would do is they would have areas. Well, let's just finish and then we'll do the Rashbam who gives this detail. My time, what's the reason that you don't get the chazaka on that land? So Meimar Amar, the owner is going to say, that anything that this guy plants is going to be eaten by the wild beasts. So take a look at Rashbam. This is the Rashbam on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashbam. Haiman de Aksik Meguda de Arude Ulabar Lo Havi Chazaka. Somebody who grabs onto the area outside the fence where the wild animals are and goes and from outside that the fence that was supposed to protect from the wild animals and outside it, meaning it's a space where the wild animals could be. So Chayot HaSadeh Shibos V'Ochlos Hazraim, because that space is a place where the wild animals will come and eat the seeds. Shebikutzot HaSadeh, that are on the edge of the field. V'yesh she'osin kiros the Godrin Hasada Umenikan Karka Chutz Lakir. They will sometimes fence in the field and leave some space outside the wall. Ma'at, a little bit. Besadot Hasmuchos Liyar, to fields that are close to the forest, to the wilderness. Umashlichin Sham Zera, and they'll throw out some seeds there. Umashit Someach Bosa chayos v'ochlos, and what ends up growing, the wild animals will come and eat ochlos oto, and they'll come and eat it. Nichnasos besada, and the point is that we do that in order to make it less likely that they try to get into the actual field where you're growing stuff for the marketplace. So achshab, now. V'im ba adam v'hechzik ba'oto karka. And so now if somebody comes and takes that land, chutz l'geder, outside the fence, Aina chazaka, it's no chazaka at all. Diyachol lomar, because the original owner can say, de kaven de koma de zarabahu karka, anything he plants in that space, arudei achle, the wild animals are going to eat it, achrule, lo ichpatli, I don't care. Why should I care about it? So limchot, and therefore I won't care to complain and protest. Dolo achzik, and so as a result, it's not going to be a chazaka. Inshi, and because it's not the way people make a chazaka. It's not something on which people make a chazaka. Lefikach lo havya chazaka, and so therefore it's not going to be a valid chazaka. So that is ruling number 2. Ruling number 3, or additional ruling number 3, V'amar Rav Yehuda.
But that is his land, isn't it?
Yes,
He's basically donating it to the wild animals, but it's still his land. Not
correct.
really.
Correct. And the point is that Shimon can't come and say, oh, now I'm going to live on this land and say that I bought it from you, and therefore, because I've been here for 3 years. That essentially, if you buy that land, you need to keep the contract forever, because that most people don't just plant on that space because it's the space for wild animals to be. Okay, so the ruling number 3, V'amar Rav Yehuda, achla orla eina chazaka. If you eat orla, the produce of the first 3 years, you also don't get a chazaka. So, and Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that says the same thing. Achla orla shvius v'kilayim. If you eat orla or shvius, the year's produce from the 7th year, or kilayim, or produce that is mixed together, grapes and other produce. So einu chazaka. Then grapes and grain. So einu chazaka. You don't have a chazaka. So let's take a look at.
That's because it's an Isser min Torah, right?
Well, yes. Well, of course, there is no Isser from the Torah to eat the Shvius. That's the Shemitah produce, but it's considered Hefker. So the point is that in all 3 of these cases, we're going to say that there is no claim on it. So let's take a look at Rashbam. Ochla Orla, basically smack in the middle of the narrow lines. Achat min hashalosh shanim. If one of the 3 years, Habi Shanat Orla, was a year of Orla, Einu Chazaka. Delo ichpat lebal hasada bishnasa Orla. Because the owner of the field doesn't care about whether somebody is eating in the year of Orla. V'lekach lo micha, and so therefore he didn't bother to complain. The kol shekain im shloshtan shnei Orla, and certainly if all 3 years are the 3 years of Orla, well, you certainly can't get a chazaka on that basis. So Orla v'kilayim achilasan be'isr. When it comes to Orla and kilayim, it's because it's prohibited. And shvius hefker, and shvius is open to everybody. Lekach lo micha, and so that's why you wouldn't complain. Below havi chazaka, and so as a result, you don't get a chazaka. Uperish Rabbeinu Chananel, interestingly enough, the Rabbeinu Chananel actually understands, he has a different girsa here. Garsina and Hachi, Achla Orla v'shvius v'kilayim harei zu chazaka below nehira. He says that the Rabbeinu Chananel has a different girsa that actually suggests that you don't. Interestingly enough, if we take a look at Tosfos, he says he has Rabbeinu Chananel garis. Hachi garis Rabbeinu Chananel, Achla Orla shvius v'kilayim havya chazaka. It is a chazaka. V'chein nira l'ri, and the Ri actually thinks ikar that's correct. V'ayri kisha achla zmuros. And the point is that it's not about eating the actual prohibited produce, but having the branches. And so as a result, the branches which are not prohibited, and you take those and you use them as firewood, etc., that would constitute an actual chazaka. And so actually, you don't even have to say that Tosfos and Rashbam are disagreeing about the bottom line law. It could be that both of them agree, but in any event, it's an interesting debate regarding this Gemara. Okay, so now that we've
could you say that he acquires it in a chazak, so to speak, chazaka, that would enable him to use it after the years of Orla are completed? So in year 4 or 5, he establishes a chazak. He's not eating it now, but he's holding it for the next 2 years, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, until it becomes permitted to eat it.
So let's explain your case a little bit more, because if I have Orla tree year 3 and I take those produce and now I hold that produce, maybe I put it in deep storage in a refrigerator. I hold it until after the produce has come for the next year, when it's now I have to bring it to Yerushalayim or whatever. The produce that I have from storage from the previous year, it doesn't become kosher. So it's not as if I can store it and it will eventually become kosher. So we have to be talking, and we need me to consume something during the year that I am trying to take a chazaka. It's not enough for me to just plow the field or do something that shows that that I care about the field, because otherwise the person whose field it is could just say, well, he didn't do anything that harmed me, so I'm just going to, that's totally fine. So it's only when the person takes something that actually is going to be negative for the original owner that you could get the chazaka. But what you're right about is the following. If in the case of the Rabbeinu Hananel, where you take the branches and you cut down some of the branches and you use them as firewood or whatever, for useful purposes. So now, when Orla is finished, you're exactly right that then you would have a chazaka according to Rabbeinu Hananel. So that's exactly you're exactly right from that perspective. Okay,
with the fruits, you actually have to eat the fruits. I thought we were learning before, if someone sits on the field, holds the field, I didn't know they had to eat it if he finds.
No, you have to. We've been using the term achla shnei chazaka. It means that you have to actually have some benefit from the field. And I think we're going to have, in fact, right now, one of the rulings that we're about to say are going to detail a very important fact along those lines. So give me just a moment and we'll come back to this question in a moment. But let's take a look at the next one. We have a couple of different paragraphs, which are each going to be different rulings. So Amar of Yosef, achla shachas. So if you the person eats unripe grain, lo hava chazaka, that's not considered a chazaka. And Rashbam helps us out. Achla shachas, it's about 15, 16 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashbam on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Shelo himtin ad shetigadel. He didn't wait until it got to maturity. Hatvua, the grain, got to maturity. Ela gimel shanim katzra kishehi shachat. If for each of the 3 years, he ate it before it became ripe. And it's food for his animals. Einu chazaka. That is not enough to make a chazaka. Deshamit v'achil lo v'lo hava v'lo haya ochel kishar b'nei adam. Because he cut it short and ate it, and that's not the way people eat. L'fikach lo chashash zeh limchopo. So because he didn't actually act like an owner, so then the original owner doesn't have to be concerned and doesn't have to complain. Sheyesh raglayim ladavar sheyarehu lahachzik kishar b'nei adam lefisha begazal yared ba. And he can say, listen, the reason that you did that is because you were afraid to take it like a regular person. And so you went in early in order to try and get it. But all you are is a thief. And as a result, I don't need to complain about it. I can just you can't use that as a basis for your chazaka. So, Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman says tafticha lo havi. I'm sorry. So now, so
Amar Rava,
also
Ibn
Amar
Sabar.
Rava, ibit savar mechoza kaima. However, if this was in the area of mechoza, havi chazaka, then you would have a chazaka. Why? So again, Rashbam explains, but savar mechoza, but bikat mechoza havi chazaka lefisha ashirim heim. They were very wealthy there. Ubehemos lehem harbe, and they have lots of animals. V'darkam laha'achil hasados lebehemos keshehin shachas. So they would actually create the straw or hay in order, even though that meant not having fully ripe grains, they would do so because they needed it in order to feed their animals. Okay, so
So they were
next.
feeding their animals products that were not yet ripe.
Correct, exactly, because animals are more willing to eat those products. And so as a result, that would be sufficient. And so now that we've said that in those places it is customary for people to do this, so now all of a sudden it's permitted for you can use that basis for a chazaka. Okay, Rav Nachman, tefticha lo havi chazaka. If you have tefticha, you don't get a chazaka. So what is tefticha? So 4 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashbam. Karka petucha, it's an open field. It's a field with openings in the ground. Umleya bikaim, and fills in a valley. Ve'ena motzia peroteha lo havi chazaka. And I'm sorry, and it's it doesn't really produce much in the way of crops. And lo havi chazaka, and it's not considered chazaka d'mipnei rata lo hikbid limchot, because it's such bad land. There's no basis to complain about it. All right, so that's the next ruling, and here's the one that's relevant to what you were saying before. Apik Korah v'ayel Korah. If the amount that you plant is equal to the amount of the output, so lo havi chazaka. So then that's also not going to be a chazaka. Because again, you need to show some level of consumption associated with it. It is not sufficient for you to sort of do a little thing here and a little thing there and then say that it's your field. You need to act like the owner. And again, that goes back to the point that it's not sufficient for you to just be there. You need to be doing something, consuming something in a more significant manner that shows you're an owner. V'hani debei reish galusa lo machzekiban v'lo machazkinan behu. That when it comes to the household of the head of the exilarch's home, so then the reish galusa, the people who are the head of the exile, so then they cannot make a sufficient claim and chazaka on somebody else's property, and you can't make a claim on their property. Why not? So Rashbam helps us out. Third of the wide lines in Rashbam, beginning of the line. Lo mechaski ban, you can't do a chazaka on them. On us, they can't do a chazaka on us because because if one of them were to make a chazaka on our fields, ain't a chazaka. It's not a good chazaka. They need to be careful about their contract. Because they are so powerful that nobody would complain against them. And so as a result, because it's logical that no one will complain, they need to make sure to keep their contracts. We can't make a claim on them. Again, continuing in the Rashbam, because they're so wealthy, and they have lots of fields and homes. They are fine with people. They allow people to live in their houses, and they'll be quiet. And they'll actually be happy. Because their work on the land will actually make the land more valuable. And whatever they find, it will be fixed. And so as a result, they're not going to bother to do a macha because lefisha bizroa yitalu et shalahem, because with their, they, if they wanted to, their arm could take what they had, what they own, kols mancha yirzo, anytime they want to, because of their power that they have. The yesh mefarshim lefisha asukim b'tzarchei, where some people say it's because they are busy working on the benefit, for the benefit of the public in Yodin, and therefore they don't know what's going on. Below here, but I don't like that explanation. Rashbam says he prefers the prior one, that basically they have the sufficient power that they can take it on their own. So as a result, they have no need for macha.
So why are we saying that the first section of this phrase, lo machziki ban, that they would
right, they cannot get a chazaka in our property.
But they're so powerful and so strong. Why can't they just walk into our property and say, I want this property, the eminent domain or whatever?
They can.
So that is chazaka, basically.
No, that is not a chazaka. Meaning, at some point, their presence will never be considered ownership, and so eventually, if it goes in somebody else's hands, my original deed will still be the deed that wins the day, because there's no new deed. So that's your great question, right? The point is that you need to, if I hold on to my deed, I will win, and I will be the one who gets the land. It just needs to be at a time when they don't have the power that they have. So
so they can walk in and take it, but they don't really own it. They just
correct.
They usurped it. But when they're out of power, I produce the deed and I say I want my land back.
That's exactly right. And that's why we say that they don't have a chazaka. And similarly, when it comes to their land, we can't get a chazaka in their land without holding a deed, because, again, they don't have any need to complain, because they could always figure that they could just take it back. So they don't need to complain about somebody else not being there. So, okay. So next, the ha'avadim, we talked about in our Mishnah, we talked about—
just thinking a little bit about this week's Torah, this week, maybe last week, Torah portion, where we take from the Midyanim.
Yes.
And so I don't know if anyone owned it before that. I mean, but we're taking it from the non-Jew, basically. And
correct. Well, that's certainly a war-based action. And
right. So in a war, I'm thinking you take, correct. So then you can establish chazaka as a result of a war. Look at the Golan and other places. I mean,
well, I mean that's because in 1948, when they established the UN, they took or just before that, when they established the UN, they created a international law that basically said we're not going to allow countries to win land via war. But until then, that was absolutely the law of the world. Was you could. So I mean, it's ironic, right? I mean, the United States has, is much larger because of the certain wars that it fought, whether with Mexico, taking over land that, of course, the Native Americans were here for. But that all happened, before the United Nations was established, and one of the aspects of the United Nations, one of the things that was agreed to as part of that, is that you cannot take land by force. Now,
in 1967, Israel took the Golan, right? So
correct. And that is why international law does not recognize it, even if the United States recognizes the Golan as part of Israel. You'll see in the news reports today that people still refer to the Golan as occupied because of that UN treaty. And the UN treaty is unclear, or makes no exception for a war of defense and for taking land in defense. And unfortunately, so as a result, even though Israel is holding it because, took it because the Syrians were using it to send rockets into Israel. That is not, unfortunately, a legal basis in order to do it. So you need to effectively, in order to transfer land, you need a treaty, and that's why Israel and the United States take a position that we can't force something on Israel. We need to have a negotiated settlement with the Palestinians in order to end up with a land agreement that would actually set definitive borders. But until then, we end up with this situation where the Palestinians have, an arguable claim. The other interesting thing to note about the '67 war is that, there's the '67 war was fought from the armistice lines that existed in 1948, but even those weren't true boundaries. One could argue, and I'm sure that the Palestinians would argue that you have to go back to the UN announced division of the land of Israel, which gave the Jewish people a much, much, much smaller piece of property than even they had in 1948 after the War of Independence. So the bottom line is that it's all very complicated. But the point is that that's a relatively new development that in the world's history, that war is not a basis to take land. But okay, now let's get to another thing that's thankfully a little less common today. Although, I was just there was just an article about slaves in Southeast Asia where people are essentially stolen and effectively kept as slaves in order to engage, by the way, in efforts to try and steal people's money through various scams that they basically get steal these people, and then they're forced to work computer scams. But in any event, avadim yesh lahem chazaka. When it comes to a slave, you can get a chazaka. Hagodros ein lahem chazaka. But animals don't have a chazaka, and animals can move around, and slaves can move around. So doesn't that show that and our thought right now is that we're talking about a chazaka as that whoever holds on to them at the moment is able to own it. So Amarava ein lahem chazaka la'alter. No, what we mean is that they don't have a chazaka immediately, meaning it's not like other movable property. But you do get a chazaka after 3 years, meaning that just as real estate, you have a chazaka after 3 years, so too when it comes to a slave. So Amarava, imhaya katan mutal ba'arisa. If you have a baby slave that is in a cradle, yeshlo chazaka la'alter. Well, then it's really like movable property, and so as a result, you're going to get the chazaka immediately. Well,
chazaka of the child, or chazaka of the child
on the child. Chazaka on the child. Sorry, did you have a follow-up?
I'm saying the chazak. What does that mean? He finds a baby in the.
Oh, it's a baby slave.
So a baby slave, and he has chazaka on what? On the baby, or on the
baby slave? Meaning, if I say that I purchased this baby slave from you, I don't have any contract, but since it's a baby slave and it's in my possession, we assume that I am the owner. Okay, so pshita, that's obvious because the baby's not able to move around. Of course, we're going to treat it like regular non-mobile but movable property, where we say that whoever's holding it, possession is 9/10 of the law. So that's what we're going to say. Same to here. So no, lo tzricha de isle ima. No, because of course remember that the baby has a mother, and so the mom could be treated differently. Maybe we need to worry that the mom brought the baby there and left the baby there, and as a result, you don't say that the person who's holding on to the baby gets a chazaka. Kamash malan. Ima lo menashya bra. A mother is not going to forget her son, and as a result, unless the son has actually been sold, we're not, the mother's not going to separate, and therefore we can assume that whoever's holding onto the baby is able to is the rightful owner.
So does he have a chazaka of the mother as well?
No,
What's
no. The mother would need a chazaka of shalosh shanim. It's not enough for the mother to be in the possession because the mother has the ability to walk around. And so as a result of the mother, you would need to have a sale contract to show your ownership of the mother in order to be able to.
So with the baby, I don't. The baby is there, and the Gemara objection says maybe the mother brought him there. Isn't that reasonable?
It
I mean,
is
how did the
reasonable.
baby get there?
But, well, you're at because well, I'm going to claim that I bought the baby, right? And the point is that the concern was, well, maybe the mother brought the baby and accidentally left her, and so we need to treat the baby like the mother, that you can't treat, that it's movable, that it moves on its own, and as a result, its location does not provide any evidence of ownership. And
Right,
what the answer is no, a mom is not going to leave the baby alone. And so as a result, the mom is not going to leave the baby unless she's forced to. And the only way that she would be forced to is if the baby was sold. Otherwise, the mom would, of course, take the baby with her. So
right,
therefore, because the baby is now in my possession and the mom is not, the baby belongs to me. It must be that the baby belongs to me. It's just like if you have a watch, right? You're gonna, a very valuable watch. You're gonna make sure that that watch is always on your wrist. But if it's in my possession, that watch, now it belongs to me because, especially if I have a claim that I bought it from you, you're right. It belongs to me because all metaltalin belongs to we treat metaltalin as it belonging to the person who's holding it.
we could say that he kidnapped the baby.
We could say that, but we don't say that. That's exactly the point. We say that whoever's holding it, possession is 9/10 of the law. And so as a result, again, there could be more claims, but at the moment, we're just saying, you say that baby belongs to you. I say that the baby belongs to me. I have the baby in my possession. Unless somebody has more evidence, we're going to say that the baby belongs to me. Even if you are yelling up and down that I stole it from you. Because again, possession is not, because if we say the exact same thing with the watch, again, you say that the watch belongs to you. I'm holding the watch. I've got the watch. I'm wearing the watch. The watch belongs to me. We're not going, you can complain all you want until you bring witnesses and evidence and facts. There's nothing that you can do about it. Similarly with the baby. That's what we're analogizing the two situations. Again, I'm not advocating for it, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing that we analogize a baby, but that's what the Gemara is doing. All right, so Hanu Izi de Achlu Chushla Benarda. There were some goats who were eating some husked barley in Narda. Asa Mare de Chushla Tafsinhu, and the owner of the barley came and took the goats, figuring that they ate his goat, they ate his barley, so now he's owed money. V'hava katan tuva, and he claimed that they ate a lot of barley. Amar Avua de Shmuel, so the father of Shmuel ruled, Yachol litzon ad kedei demehen. He has the ability to claim that the goats up to the value of the barley up to the value of the goats. Because the e-boy amar lekokos he him biyadi. Because if he wanted to, he could say he purchased the goats. So the point is that again, possession's 9/10 of the law. So if I tell you that I want to, if you take something from me, you can use that as a basis to say that I owe you to help you collect. V'amarish Lakish, one second, Hagodrot, Hagodrot ein lahen chazaka. That's something that that animals that because they walk around, they don't have a chazaka. No, shiny is a demisira leroa. That goats are different because they are given to a shepherd, and as a result, there's somebody always to watch them, and they don't just go around freely. V'ha'ikut safra ufanya. Well, one second. What about the morning and evening when the goats aren't watched? Benarda toy shchichi. No, when those in Naharda, there are lots of thieves, and so miyada liyada mishalme. So as a result, the goats are always being watched, and so as a result, in that situation, we'll say that goats do have a chazaka. You do get a chazaka immediately, as if they're metaltalin, and as a result, the point is that you're allowed to make that claim and use that as a basis to try and collect your money. And if the person wants his goats back, he has to give you the amount of money up to the value of the goats. Rabbi Yishmael Omer Shlosha Chadashim. Rabbi Yishmael said that, of course, it was 3 months. You didn't need a year, 3 straight years. You have 3 months, then a year, and then 3 months. So layman near Ike Benayu, maybe the difference between Rabbi Yishmael, and Rabbi Akiva says you only need 1 month. So maybe we could say that the difference between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is whether or not plowing alone is sufficient. The Rabbi Yishmael savar near lo hava chazaka, the Rabbi Akiva savar near havi chazaka. Maybe we could say that that's what they're arguing about. That the reason that 1 month is that 1 month is sufficient is because plowing alone allows you to get a chazaka, whereas Rabbi Yishmael says you need 3 months to have some kind of crops. So no, that's not true. But Tizbara, does that make sense? Because Rabbi Akiva, my area chodesh, why did you even need a month? As we turn to Lamed Vav and Bet. Afil yom echad nami, even 1 day should be sufficient. Ela dekuli alma near lo havi chazaka. Rather, it's clear that everybody agrees that plowing does not constitute a chazaka. V'hacha peri rava uperi zuta ika benayo. And what they're arguing about is how fully grown does the crop need to be in order for you to get the chazaka. Obviously, Rabbi Akiva requires less fully grown, and Rabbi Yishmael says more fully grown. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan, near Eino Chazaka. Again, we have the brisa that says that plowing doesn't constitute a chazaka. But there are some who say that it does. Man Yeshomrim. So who are the Yeshomrim? Amar Rav Chisda, Rabbi Acha, it's Rabbi Acha. Titania, Nara Shein Ashana Uzra Shtayim, Nara Shtayim Uzra Ashana, Eina Chazaka. That according to the first opinion, the Tanakama, if you have plowing either for 1 or 2 of the years, you don't get a chazaka. Rabbi Acha Omer Harezo Chazaka. No, even just plowing in year 1 and year 3, that will be sufficient for a chazaka. Amar Rav Ashi she'elis kol gedolei hador v'amru near hari chazaka. I asked all of the people, the great people of the generation, and they all said that it is a chazaka. Amar le Rav Bivi the Rav Nachman, my time of demand to Amar near havi chazaka. Why do they say that just plowing constitutes a chazaka? So lo avid inish decharivu because people don't allow somebody else to plow their land and they stay silent. Umay taima demand to amar near lo havi chazaka. And what about the ones who say that it isn't considered a chazaka? Because Meimar Amar, the person whose owner could say kol shiyavo kol shiva v'shiva decharvu la'ayel pay, because every one of their plowings is helpful. Meaning, why should I bother to complain when you're making my field a better place? So Shalchule Bnei Pum Nahara LeRav Nachman Bar Rav Chisda. So the people of Pum Nahara sent a message. Yilamdu Rabbeinu Nora Havi Chazaka O Lo Havi Chazaka. Do we say that plowing is or is not a basis for Chazaka? Amralahu Rabbi Acha V'Chol Gedolei Ador Amrei Lir Lo Hari Chazaka. So listen to Rabbi Acha and all the great people. They all say that plowing is a Chazaka. Well, Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rubusa lemichshav gavre. 1 second. Is it so great to say all the people? 1 second. Ha Rav Shmuel bevavel, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva be'eretz Yisrael, Amri near lo havi chazaka. When you take a look at who it is, when it's Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva in Eretz Yisrael and Rav and Shmuel in Bavel, they all say that it doesn't work as a chazaka. So it makes a difference whose opinion is that you're trying to follow. And Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, Masnizani. Again, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is according to our Mishnah. As we saw, they require 3 months in the year or 1 month in the beginning and last year. And so as a result, that's way more time than you would need in order to do plowing. So it's clear that plowing is not sufficient. Rav Maihi, what's the proof that Rav says that plowing doesn't work? To Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, Zo divrei Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva say in our Mishnah. Aval chachamim omrim chazkasa shalosh shanim miyom liyom. You need three full years every day. Miyom liyom lemeute mai. What does day to day come to exclude? Lav lemeute near delo. So lav lemute near delo. It's coming to tell us that it doesn't include plowing. So as a result, plowing alone is not sufficient. And Shmuel Maihi, again, what's the source that Shmuel also believes that plowing is not sufficient? Because again, once you say that the Chachamim are the ones who say that plowing is not sufficient, since we follow the Chachamim in a machlokus with the Chachamim, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, so as a result, it's clear that Rav is saying that plowing doesn't work. And Shmuel Maihi, what's the proof for Shmuel? Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Zo divrei Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva. Again, highlighting that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva say that you need either 3 months or 1 month in the beginning and the end. You need to harvest 3 crops of dates. The Yivtzor Shalosh Betziros and 3 crops of grapes. The Yimsok Shalosh Nusikos and 3 crops of olives. So my Beinahu, what's the difference between Rav and Shmuel? Because both of them seem to be saying you need 3 full years of a chazaka. So Amar Abaye, Dekel Na'ara Ika Beinahu. When you have a young date palm tree, that's the difference between them. So let's take a look and see what does that mean. That Dekel Na'ara Ika Beinahu, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down in the Rashbam towards the bottom of the page on Lamed Vav Amabet. So Dekel Yalda Ubachura. So a young Dekel tree. And then the Daled says Dibepachos Megimel Shanim Shlemos, that you can Toenis Gimel Pamim, that you can actually get 3 crops off of it in less than 3 years. The Shmuel Havya Chazaka Begimel Gederos, that with 3 different opportunities to take those to harvest those dates, that will give you a chazaka. Aval gavta leka gimel shanim, even though it's not 3 years shlemos, 3 complete years. Rav be'inan gimel shanim miyom liyom, and Rav says no, you need 3 full years, and so that's the that is the difference between those 2 opinions. And with that, we'll set it up now to look at the last Mishnah, which will take us back to the topic of trees and what you get a chazaka on when you take possession of trees. So we'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow. I've recorded that already, and so you should receive the links to the recordings, God willing, in tomorrow and Friday's daily email.
So Rav and Shmuel here, they both of them agree that there's no chazaka, right?
Both of them agree that plowing alone doesn't allow you to have a chazaka.
Right.
And that's exactly right. And so we have, when you have the great people of Bavel and the great people of Israel all saying that there's no chazaka, and indeed Rav and Shmuel are interpreting the 3 years as saying that the Chachamim are saying that it's no chazaka. So then it's really all of the Tanaim are saying no chazaka for plowing. So as a result, we're going to say no chazaka for plowing. You have to do more, and that's addressing the issue that you raised earlier today. So exactly, the Gemara was going to get to exactly your question.
But there is a difference between Rav and Shmuel, though, and that has to do with the
correct. That when we say 3 years according to the Chachamim, when we say 3 years according to the Chachamim, Shmuel says it means 3 gatherings, and so if you are gathering in 3 different years, even if it doesn't take 3 full years, you're fine, and you can have a chazaka. Whereas Rav says, no, you need 3 full years, 3 complete and total years. It's not just about the gathering. And so with that.
But that's not the near, that's not the plowing.
Correct. Everybody, all of them, both of them agree no plowing. So 100%. That's exactly right. That's originally the Gemara brought Rav and Shmuel to show plowing is not sufficient. And then we needed to clarify, well, what's the difference between them? How do they disagree in their interpretation of the Chachamim? And so the difference in between their interpretations of the Chachamim is Rav says that you need 3 years and it doesn't make a difference. You need to, of course, take in 3 sets of crops, but you can't get a chazaka with less than 3 years. Whereas Shmuel says, no, even if you have less than 3 years, if that's the if you've taken in 3 sets of crops, that has been sufficient for your chazaka.
Okay, so who were the Gedolei Ador according to Rav Nachman?
That's a good question.
Rav Nachman and Rabbi Acha. That V'chol Gedolei Ador, who are those that said that near is sufficient?
That is an excellent question, and I don't think we are told who they are at all. Oh, I guess no, we're told it's Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Acha. The question is
But
so
he says Amalu Rabbi Acha V'chol Gedolei Ador. Who are the
yes,
rest of them?
That's an excellent question. We're not told that we're not told who the others are. That's an excellent point. We're not told. So they didn't come down through the chain. All right. Have a wonderful day. And again, sorry that we're doing recordings for the next 2 days, but God willing, I'll be back on Monday, and hopefully I'll have an opportunity to go back to doing summaries. So I miss having the summaries, which I hope is also useful. So have a great day.